Good morning, Year 5, and welcome to our latest study of a reading text. We are doing Floodland, Chapter 1 this week. Now, I know you're all quite familiar with Floodland from reading it with your teachers and co-teachers in your morning and afternoon briefings, but this week we're really going to delve into it and look at some questions around this chapter. So as we know, Floodland is a children's adventure thriller by an author called Marcus Sedgwick, who was from England. It was first published in 2000, so well before you were born, and it tells the story of how Zoe, left behind in Norwich, survives as England is covered in water. Alone and desperate among marauding mobs and gangs, she manages to dig a derelict boat called Laika from the mud, and she escapes Eel Island where more danger lies. So that's the context of the story, and I know you've discussed this again with your own teachers, and we are going to look at this more deeply today and throughout the week. So firstly, we're going to go through our vocabulary that we will encounter throughout the text. So the first word is deserted. My turn, deserted. Your turn. So deserted means a place that is empty of people. There are no people around, it is totally empty. So for example, the roads were deserted during the snow and ice. So quite often the roads are deserted when it's quite snowy. The roads have been deserted during lockdown as well. There are barely any people around. Now, before Christmas, Westfield would have been absolutely packed with people. So do you think deserted is an appropriate word to describe Westfield now? Why or why not? Maybe pause the video and think about that question for a second. Fantastic, yeah. Westfield would be deserted now because no one is allowed inside it. So it's the total opposite to packed. Deserted means a place that is empty of people. So our second word that we will encounter throughout the text is derelict. My turn, derelict. Your turn? Fantastic. And we're really looking forward to our teachers, hearing from you and watching videos of maybe any actions you can create for these words. So derelict means something that has not been taken care of or has been abandoned. So you can see this house here has been totally abandoned and is now derelict. It has not been taken care of. So derelict would mean that not being taken care of and abandoned. So you could have a deserted and derelict place or deserted and derelict building. For example, the haunted house on top of the hill was a derelict building. It had not been taken care of and people thought it might be haunted. Our third word is mob. Mob, fantastic. Mob means a large crowd of angry or excited people. So if you've seen the movie Shrek, you will know that an angry mob chased him out of his swamp. So it's a really good one to try and visualize if you've seen the movie Shrek. They were an angry mob, just like this picture shows as well. It's a mob of angry people, or it can be excited as well sometimes, but quite often it means angry. Just like in our story with Zoe, the angry mob are coming after her because she is escaping without them. And our next word is stupor. My turn, stupor. Your turn? Excellent. Now this is definitely a new word for most of you. Stupor means a state of near unconsciousness. So I'll read it out in a sentence for you. Kate was in a stupor after banging her head on the ground. So you can see Kate here in the picture. She is nearly unconscious because she banged her head on the ground. She is not asleep, but she's nearly unconscious. She's nearly lost all her consciousness. She's nearly passed out because she's banged her head. So my turn again, stupor. Your turn. Excellent. Well done. Next word is clambered. Now, clambered is like to climb, but it means to climb with difficulty in an awkward way using your hand and feet. So you can see this man here, he is trying to clamber over the wall. He's doing it awkwardly. He's not climbing with ease. He's finding it a bit difficult. So a sentence with clambered would be, the escaped prisoner clambered over the barbed wire. So a prisoner would be in such a rush to escape that he might clamber over the barbed wire. He would do it awkwardly and it would be difficult for him to do. Very like climb, but just more awkward than climb. Once more, my turn, clambered. Your turn. Brilliant, well done. So our next word is waded. Waded means to walk in water or something else that makes movement slow or difficult. So you can see the man here wading through the water. Now, do you think you could wade through the streets of London? Why or why not? Yeah, exactly. So to wade means to walk through water or something that makes it really difficult to walk, like high grass, where you have to drag your legs. So at the moment, while you're sitting down, try and drag your legs and pretend to wade. So an example of a sentence would be the surfers waded through the waves into the ocean. They have to walk slowly and with difficulty through the ocean to make it to the waves, just like the man here in the picture is, or if you're wading through high grass. You wouldn't be wading through the streets of London because you just walk, or have a synonym for walk. Wade wouldn't really make sense in that context. Okay, and allotment. My turn. Allotment, your turn. Allotment is a plot of land rented by someone to grow vegetables and flowers. So often in villages you might see allotments where people rent a little bit of land so that they can grow vegetables or flowers if they do not have room in their own house to do that. So in the story, Zoe has a friend called Natasha who used to work at the allotments where she would grow vegetables and pick them. So an example of a sentence would be, the allotment was full of vegetables in autumn. So you can see here the allotment and be full of vegetables where people grow them. And finally, our last word is methodical. My turn. Methodical. Your turn. Excellent. So to do something methodically is to do it or be arranged or to act in an orderly and systematic way. So us teachers always tell you, especially in maths, to work methodically to get the correct answer. All our steps of success are methodical. We work slowly through them in an orderly and systematic way to get the correct answer. If you were playing with a Rubik's Cube, you would work in a methodical way to complete it. So for example, the girl worked in a methodical manner in order to complete her work. Just like you do in school, you work in a methodical manner, you work in an order and in a system so that you can complete your work to the highest standard possible. Right, fantastic, well done. So that is our vocab, and before we do the activity, I'm just going to flick you over to my visualizer and we will read the text. Now I know you've read it with your teachers, but we're going to go through it once again just so we can understand it a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to read today, and then tomorrow and as the days go on, you will take more ownership and responsibility over our reading. But just because it's the first day, just follow along with me as I read. Off we go. Zoe ran, harder than she had ever run in her life. Her feet pounded through the deserted streets of derelict buildings. Somewhere, not far behind, she could hear the gang coming after her. It felt as if her heart would burst, but she didn't slow down. She'd been planning to leave the island for a long time, but had been putting it off. It was a big decision to set out to the sea in a tiny rowing boat. Now she had no choice. Before, no one had bothered her. Zoe was a loner. Most of the people left on Norwich hung around together in groups, but she preferred to be on her own. It was safer that way, because you never know whom you could trust. Somehow, someone had found out about the boat she'd been hiding. A boat was an escape route, a way to get away from Norwich, which got smaller every year as the sea kept on rising. It didn't matter that there could be only room for 2 people at most in her boat. Others had joined in the chase, and now a mob of about 15 people were hot on her heels. Hot on her heels. What do you think that means? Take a moment and think about that. Yeah, so hot on her heels means that they're getting really, really close to her and are gaining on her. There was only one way out, to get her boat before they got to her. She ran on while her body screamed for her to stop. Get back here, someone yelled angrily at her, though they couldn't see her. It wasn't far to the little shed where she'd hidden Laika, her boat. A couple more streets of derelict shops to where what was left of the city fell away into the sea. If the sea hadn't come, she might have been shopping here herself, with her parents perhaps. From much practice, she squashed the thought of her parents as soon as it started, and kept on running. Just before she rounded a corner, she heard more shouts from behind. They had seen her. There, come on, shouted another voice. Get her. Scared, she made the corner, but her feet slipped from under her on the wet ground. She went sprawling and slid clumsily in the mud. She started to panic badly and made a mess of getting up again. She had dropped her pack as she fell, but there was no time to pick it up. The sound of running feet came closer. Another 2 seconds, and they would be around the corner. She got up and practically threw herself over a wall. She landed awkwardly, but she'd won a little more time. She was in a graveyard. It led away down a hill to where a small brick shed stood near the water's edge. Once it had contained all the equipment for looking after the graveyard, but now it contained Zoe's boat. The previous night she had rowed around from the warehouse where she had found the boat and fixed it. The old building had been unsafe when she discovered it and had been getting worse. She decided to find a new place to keep her boat, and the shed seemed ideal. In the dark, she had dragged the boat a short distance from the water to the shed. It had been very hard work. At night, she hadn't noticed the deep ruts the boat's keels had made in the sodden grass. So at this point, we can really visualize Zoe dragging the boat. She's exhausted. It's nighttime. She's trying to drag the boat out of the shed, but she hasn't noticed the marks it's left on the wet grass. Do you think that will be a problem for her later on? We'll find out. Anyway, in daylight, even in her mad rush, they were obvious. She would be lucky if no one had already found it. Laika, Zoe panted as she opened the shed door. Please be here, Laika. It was all right. The boat was still there waiting for her. Pulling it across the grass and then into the water, she dared to look behind her for the first time. Her stomach twisted with fear. The gang were storming down the hill, weaving in and out of the crumbling gravestones. Zoe moved faster. She clambered aboard and put the oars out, then started to pull. They were at the water now, and though one or two stopped, the rest came splashing madly after her. Take me with you. Come back. We won't hurt you. Just take us with you. Zoe could see their eyes clearly. She saw fear, but she couldn't trust them. Since she'd lost her parents, she'd made it a rule not to trust anyone. Zoe had heard people say they'd lost someone when really they meant they had died. In Zoe's case, lost meant exactly that. It was still unbelievable and so stupid. She looked at the crowd in the water again. If she went back, there'd be a fight over her boat, and she wouldn't get a look in. She rowed on, pulling harder, even though she was safely away. Slowly, she watched the people dragged themselves out of the water and waded back to the shore. Natasha was there too. That hurt most of all. Natasha was the closest thing she had to a friend. Zoe used to see her when the supply ships came before they stopped coming. After that, she saw her sometimes at the allotments when she went to put some work in to earn food. They would only have a little chat, but it was enough to keep Zoe from cracking up. That means going crazy or losing her mind. But now the allotment had sunk into chaos too. Zoe suddenly remembered their conversation the last time they'd met. She had been about to tell Natasha about her boat and her plans to escape, but it decided not to. Maybe Natasha had guessed from something Zoe had let slip? It didn't matter now. The crowd stood quietly watching her as she rowed away. Zoe didn't feel scared of them anymore. Sorry, she said to herself quietly. She began to cry, but she didn't stop rowing. Her uncut hair fell across her eyes, but she didn't stop to push it away. She still rowed on, her thin, hunched frame working the oars until finally she had to pause for breath. Feeling around in her pocket, she fished out her compass. It was the last thing she owned that had belonged to her parents. For that reason, she kept it in the pocket. If she hadn't, she'd have lost it when she dropped her pack. It was a little dented from her leap over the cemetery wall, but it was still working. She pointed herself southwest and rowed. She couldn't remember the name of the place that the supply ship used to come from, but she knew that the big bit of Britain was somewhere in that direction. She was rowing away from all she'd ever known. It was a strange thing. Before the previous night, she'd only ever pretended to row. Her dad had taught her in the same methodical way he did everything, so he followed an orderly and systematic way in everything he did in life. You'll need to know how to do this one day, he told her. He taught her how to use the compass, as well as a lot of stuff about survival, just in case the time came when she was on her own. And so, every now and then, when they weren't busy just trying to get by, they'd sit in an old bathtub and pretend to row. Even though it had seemed like a game to Zoe at this time, he'd made sure she was doing it right anyway, and she knew just how to do it. The only thing that surprised her was how hard it was to pull the oars through the water. Why don't you look where you're going, she'd asked her dad. When you're rowing, you mean, he said. Yes, why do you sit looking backwards? It's just the way it's done, he said. You couldn't row half as well facing forwards. It always seemed strange to her, but now it was even worse. There, before her was Norwich, getting smaller and smaller with each stroke. She was heading into the unknown, without even looking where she was going. She rowed and rowed until her small supply of food had gone. She had put the compass on the floor of the boat in front of her, and every few seconds she checked her direction against it. There was no sign of land now, and a creeping fear began to seep into her. She looked at the compass almost every stroke. It was her only chance now. Like magic, its tiny hand kept pointing in the same direction. It knew where she was going, even if she didn't. She lost all sense of time. The sun was somewhere way overhead and beat on the back of her neck, making her feel dizzy. She pushed her hair out of her face, but the sea wind blew it back across her face. She felt faint. She was in trouble. She had just enough awareness to pull in her oars. Then she slumped over them. In her stupor, she replayed the nightmare where she had lost her parents. Okay, so I'm going to bring you over to our activity for today. I'm just going to show you how we will do that. Now, this is not new to anybody, as we do this every Monday in class, normally just on a Tuesday today. Okay, so you will look at the vocab. If you can't remember what the vocab exactly means, don't forget you can always rewind the video. Okay, so our first one, we have a gap here and we have a definition next to us. All our words are up here, so I'm going to be able to try all the different words to see if they make sense to me. So the definition I have is a plot of land rented by an individual for growing vegetables or flowers. Now, I remember that Natasha used to work in a place that had a plot of land that was rented and that grew vegetables and flowers. I know deserted means empty. I know wade is a way of moving through something difficult like water or grass. Allotment, that sounds good, but I'm just going to check the rest of them first. Methodical, I know that's my step to success, so I work systematically, so it can't be a plot of land. Stupor, that means when someone nearly passes out. Clambered is to climb, so that wouldn't make sense. Mob, we've heard mob plenty of times in the last few weeks, and that means an angry group of people or an excited group. And derelict means run down or not taken care of. So I think allotment makes the most sense here. So I'll write in allotment. And there you go. Now your job is to do the next seven, vocabulary activities, and then stop before you go on to the sentences. So you're going to do number 2 to number 8 in a moment, and then I will mark that work with you before you move on to the sentences, just so you fully understand the vocabulary. Okay, so you can pause the video here and do number 2 to number 8 on the worksheet. Now you may print the worksheet if you like, but of course there is no need to do that. You can just write out the vocab and write in the answers next to it on a piece of paper. That's absolutely fine, and we love to see your work on Seesaw, whether it's printed or not. It really doesn't matter to us. So pause the video here and we'll go through the answers in a moment. Right, so well done for doing that, and I will just show you our answers. So yes, I was right with allotment as the first one. So you can give yourself a tick for that one. Well done. Next one, to walk in water or something that else makes movement slow or difficult. That was waded. So you can give yourself a tick for that one. So I'll just do it with you as well. Anything you get wrong, just fix it, because we love to see you editing as well. Now, derelict, you needed to give a definition for that. So that's just something that has not been looked after. You can just write anything along those lines as long as it's very similar in meaning to what I said. So derelict means something that has not been looked after. Next word, mob. Mob is an angry or excited group of people. So keep ticking or fixing. Next, something that is done, arranged, or acting in an orderly and systematic way. That means methodical. So well done if you got that one. Next word, clambered. Clambered is very like climb, so I can use the word climb in my definition, but it means to climb in an awkward way. So you can tick that one. Next word, a state of near unconsciousness. Now I know that is stupor because I'm really focused on that word this week because it's brand new to me. So stupor. And finally, to leave behind or to abandon, even if those one's duty to stay, or a synonym is abandon. Now, this was slightly tricky because I've kind of put in a challenge here where you have to create a different, I've created a different definition for this word, but by process of elimination, I know that is also a way of explaining what deserted is. So well done if you got those correct. And now we'll move on to the second part of our activity sheet. So This is where you need to fill in the blanks using the words given. So off we go again. The roads were something after midnight. Now, the first word I have here is the roads were deserted. That definitely sounds good, but again, I will just check. The roads were waded after midnight doesn't make sense to me. Allotment, I know what that means from my vocabulary. Methodical doesn't really make sense. Mob, the roads were derelict. Now, that's one that could confuse me. Now, I know derelict means not taken care of, which could make sense in this context, but the roads were deserted. If you look at the end of the sentence, after midnight, not many people are around after midnight, a lot of people are in bed, and deserted means nobody around. So I think deserted makes the most sense in this context. So you can write in deserted. Now you can pause the video here and complete through number 10 to 16, okay? Using this as a guide if you get stuck, or rewinding the video to have a look. So you want to pause the video here and off you go, and I'll go through the answers. Okay, fantastic. So you can hope you've all unpaused the video at this point. And we will look at our answers. So yes, I was right with deserted. So I'll give myself a tick with my blue pen. Number 10, some people thought that the derelict building on top of the hill was haunted. So give yourself a tick for that one. The angry mob chased the corrupt or the bad politician out of the town. So tick or fix for that one. She clambered over the fence to retrieve her ball. So that means she was in a rush probably. She had to climb over the fence, but she did it quite awkwardly and found it difficult, so she clambered over the fence to retrieve her ball. Tick or fix. The surfers waded through the waves and out into the deep blue ocean. Tick or fix. Mr. Jenkins was proud of the colourful array of vegetables in his allotment. Diligent pupils work in a methodical way, like I know all of Year 5 do. And finally, after falling, a falling book hit him on the head. Will sat on the floor with a look of stupor on his face. So he was on his way to passing out, or a bit dazzled. So tick or fix for that one as well. Okay, so really well done today on your vocabulary activity. Pause the video here if you need more time to look at the answers. Otherwise, I will see you all tomorrow, where we will continue with the reading and you will take a bit more ownership of it. So bye for now, and thank you so much.